Not gonna lie, the start of this chapter had me a little bit worried because it was getting a tad bit redundant because we had a lot of recap in terms of just domain amplification and domain expansions. Plus we got everyone in this chapter, literally every character that's left alive, so that's pretty cool. But the main part, the last 5 to 6 pages, we got the strongest domain expansions clashing, and it was definitely something to see. And I think that last panel caught a lot of people off guard. Not even gonna waste any more time, gonna get right into it. Feel free to subscribe and like if you enjoyed content like this. Let's go ahead and get into it. Amongst what is basically the rest of what is left of JJK's cast, watching Gojo vs Sukuna on live stream, we pretty much got a single panel shot of every character in this room talking about Gojo vs Sukuna, their domains, their strength, and etc. It is confirmed that Sukuna was using domain amplification in that punch on Gojo near the end of 224, which is what I predicted because logically that's really the only possible way he can subdue Infinity like that. Now I'm not gonna lie though, if Sukuna actually said fuck it, I'm just gonna fight Gojo without any techniques and you're gonna have to fight me hand to hand with your Infinity, that would have been kind of tough. That would have been a crazy feat for Sukuna. Side note though, Higuruma is back. Everyone's favorite lawyer after Matt Murdock has returned. Now I'm hoping he actually does something in this final stretch of the story. He's a well-written character, interesting character. Plus he picked up on domain amplification, at least the gist of it, like the concept of it, pretty quick. Which we already kind of know how smart he is and how much of a prodigy he is because, I mean, he became a grade 1 level sorcerer in less than 10 days. I did like the subtle detail as well of Choso thinking about the amplification because he was there when Kenjaku and the Disaster Curses devised that plan in Shibuya. And another character I thought just looked pretty interesting was Hakari. He has bandages on his face, and there was even a side part on his face that said ouch, like he was kind of still feeling the pain of like a fight or something. So I'm guessing our boy has been training. Obviously everyone has been training when it comes to the combat side of things. I wonder what he's been cooking up. I did like how they were building up to the domain expansion clash, asking each other why Gojo is using his domain and vice versa. My favorite part of the conversation is when Choso lets them know that Sukuna's domain expansion has an open barrier. And seeing characters like Yuta and Kashimo look shocked. Someone like Kashimo, who has hundreds of years of experience, never knowing about this was surprising. And someone as knowledgeable and strong as Yuta, never even being told about something like this, lets us know how rare this is and how insane of a feat this is to be able to open the barrier in your domain. But some of the analogies they use to show how a barrierless domain expansion works was pretty clever, even though we the audience already noticed though. The painting on empty air without a canvas is probably my favorite description of it. This also bled into Choso and Mei talking about Yuki's battle with Kenjaku and how the battle had played out, theorizing what if she started with the domain expansion before he casted his domain, whose sure hit effect would activate and cancel out the other. A ton of what ifs. But at the end of the day, you know, Kenjaku is him. He had to take care of it. And I do kind of appreciate the fact that they are talking about that because that fight really was only known to a couple of people, and now that everyone knows, it's cool that we can kind of get to see like their thoughts on how that kind of transpired. Inumaki, Ino, and Kashimo talk about the curse energy consumption and efficiency between both, and they are effectively even. Yuta chimes in by saying Sukuna has more curse energy than him, possibly even double, and Gojo's able to keep up purely just off of his 6 eyes, which I was kind of thinking you would think Sukuna would have the most curse energy. I know between the sorcerers they said Yuta has obviously the most, but out of everyone in the series it would have to be Sukuna. Not really sure if he gets a boost because he has Megames as well, but I would imagine he does because he has basically another curse energy or curse technique with him. And these characters pretty much building up what is going to be the biggest clash of Gojo and Sukuna of their domain expansion was a different approach than the usual for Gege, but this is the first time that we've had a fight that actually has some type of spectator since Goodwill, I would imagine. But this is on a way different scale and magnitude, so I can see what he's going for because he's using them also to build it up even more. Although me personally, I don't really think he would need to do that. I kind of feel like this was a way to also kind of bring fans out because it's been like a week we were on a break, so he probably was also kind of doing it as a sense of giving us a refresher. But I can kind of accept what he was trying to do. Now it's time to get back to the main event. Gojo and Sukuna clash and cast their domain expansions at the same time in another amazing looking double spread. And I think Akari and Akashima hold the record for most double spreads in a Jujutsukaisen fight, but I think Gojo and Sukuna are going to break that by far. I think they already held like 5, and it's only been like 2 or 3 chapters. Their domain expansions are launched, and this panel right here is an all-timer for me. We got Gojo's Infinite Void Barrier backdrop with Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine inside the barrier. Sukuna standing on top of the shrine, looking down on Gojo. Both of them look like they have the upper hand on each other, and it's stated that they are evenly matched with the refinement and strength of their domain expansions. This symbolizes, especially to me, more so Sukuna rather than Gojo, and it also does make Gojo look like the challenger rather than kind of how he was building himself as the prize, because you got Sukuna standing on top of his shrine looking down on Gojo like that, and he's not really emphasized like Gojo is. So it's really a cool contrast in the visual storytelling that Gojo went with this. Plus you have the skulls on the bottom, and it's kind of like Gojo is almost going to be one of those skulls in Sukuna's shrine. This is really good. And when they clash, it also reminded me of like a button mashing in a video game, or like a beam struggle in Tenkaichi. But man, did no one think about how a barrierless domain versus a barrier domain expansion would actually work, especially Sukuna, since his range is vast. Even while in another domain expansion, his technique and short hit effect still activate and trigger. And Yuji being the first one to point it out and show us in the entire series of how this would work was a cool callback. And he knew that Sukuna had the upper hand once they witnessed Sukuna's domain start to actually slash from the outside, and they hit the barrier. Sukuna destroys Gojo's domain from the outside because the barrier's domain expansions are weak from the outside attacks, and since Gojo's is so strong, his barrier is even weaker to that. And with Sukuna looking as evil as he's probably ever been in this series, Gojo's shocked. Gojo gets his throat sliced in the very last panel, and actually kind of reminded me a little bit of Hidden Inventory when Toji stabbed Gojo in the throat. Now, do I think this fight is over? Obviously not. That would be kind of the biggest letdown in the series if the fight ended off this. But I don't think I do think Gojo has a way of escaping, and there's really only one way, and that's kind of if he pretty much uses his infinity to try to exit and try to get out of the range of the domain expansion, which is a large, fast area, so I don't know how quick he can actually get out, especially with how much damage he's going to take. I'm not really sure if reverse curse technique is going to be enough, especially with Sukuna slashes and how quick they happen. So it's really just going to be dependent on how quick he can just get out of dodge. Now, if Gege wants to do like a callback from Hidden Inventory with Gojo kind of being a re-enlightenment of his cursed energy through, you know, being in this life or death scenario like it was with Toji, he could do that. But at this point, Gojo's already the strongest, so what else can he really do? So it's really just going to be up in the air, unless he surprises us and he launches an attack at Sukuna to kind of throw him off. But yeah, his only way of escaping is just getting out of the range, which is just the only downfall of Sukuna's domain expansion. I'm looking at it as if he's going to escape next chapter. I do think realistically at this point, we have to see how Sukuna's going to be post his domain expansion casting. We've seen him use his domain expansion to Someone Survive like Maharaga, but he pretty much ended up using that domain and then turned around and used the fire arrow to finish him off. So it's really going to be dependent on, can Sukuna go a certain rank, like distance, without using his domain expansion. We know he has a ton, and Gojo is also known to be able to cast his domain twice. I'm pretty sure Sukuna could probably do the same thing, if not more. And I do gotta say, the pacing of this fight, specifically up to this point, is kind of odd, because the last time we seen them fight, they're in a warm-up state. Now granted, they did a lot in their warm-up, because we got the Hollow Purple, we got Blue Lapse, we got Dismantle, now we got Domain Expansion. So what else can they really do to kind of magnify or like show how big this fight really is? Now granted, special grade fights, I've kind of always been feeling like those fights are kind of going to be short. If you look at Yuki versus Kenjaku, when you counter someone so heavily, you really only have no other choice other than to use your domain expansion, because what's the point of wasting curse energy and curse techniques on stuff you know that's not going to work? So it's kind of like a double-edged sword of how can you make this fight as great as it possibly can be if these two are barely going to do damage to each other, because they both have reverse curse technique and they both have techniques that kind of just one up the other. But yeah, I do wish the build-up was a little better in terms of just getting to this moment. Maybe like at least a couple more fighting sequences, you know, just something to really just focus on. Because I really personally don't think we needed all that refresher for domain amplification, unless it's the build-up for something for Gojo, and not only just Sukuna. Like maybe Gojo uses a simple domain, but I probably wasn't the biggest fan of how this was done. I do think it could have just been better. Or if anything, cut the dialogue kind of in half and then just give us a good portion of the fight leading into it. Now, I did pick Sukuna to win this fight, but you have to admit, for Gojo being the strongest, the simple fact that Sukuna is handling Gojo and he hasn't used any 10 shadows is pretty impressive, because he's doing pretty much the inverse of what he did for Yorozu. So I gotta say, man, 20 Fair Sukuna is gonna be a whole other problem when he does finish off Gojo, because I do think Gojo's gonna die at the end of this fight. I don't think he wins this. I think everyone should know by now that Gojo does not stand a chance in this fight. And by stand a chance, I'm not saying, oh, he just gets one shot or just destroy every time. But with the surprise factor of Sukuna's domain, I feel like if Gojo knew about that, he probably would have went with a different approach. Also, let me know in the comment section down below, how did you feel about the class of the domain expansion? Did you like it? I'm pretty sure a lot of y'all did. Now, how did you feel about the build up to it as well? Do you think it could have been better? Were you fine with it? Let me know. Now, next chapter is going to be very important, because it's going to pretty much let us know how this fight is going to go and how the rest of the story is going to shift. Because if Gojo is just on the tail end of this fight, yeah, it might be a wrap. But hope you all enjoyed. I'll let y'all in the next one. Peace. Break